Hi, it's Katrina. Welcome back. We've all heard the stories of the Great Flood, a global cataclysm that reset the entire world. But what about before? What bizarre, mind-bending, and utterly strange things existed in a world erased by water? Get ready to dive into the pre-flood mysteries because in this video, we are exploring the most perplexing, bizarre, and downright unbelievable aspects of a world swallowed by water. Dinosaurs on Noah's Ark. Cue the thunder. It shakes the sky as lightning streaks and arcs of electricity through the darkening clouds. The rain's coming down in sheets, the sky looking like it lost a bet. And somewhere in the ancient Middle East, a guy with a hammer and a dream is building a really big boat. Now ask yourself, did that boat include a couple of velociraptors in a corner stall next to a pair of dodo birds and a small box with termites in it? We've all heard the story. It's the one in textbooks, science museums, and every kid's dinosaur dreams. The story goes that 140 million years ago, dinosaurs ruled the world. Then, 66 million years ago, an asteroid wiped them all out, every last one, leaving nothing but chickens to carry on their legacy for some weird reason. But there's another version of this story one you won't hear in science class. And oh man, it throws a raptor-sized wrench into the fossil record. According to biblical scripture, the Earth wasn't slowly cooked up over billions of years like a cosmic crockpot. The Bible tells us that God created everything in 6 days. On day 6, God created land animals, including dinosaurs, which means while Adam and Eve were snacking on forbidden fruit, a dinosaur was munching on fig trees next to the Garden of Eden. When you picture the world before the flood, you have to include dinosaurs. But there's a problem. None of the dates match. By tracing genealogies from Adam to Jesus like some holy ancestry.com, biblical scholars estimate the Earth is roughly 6,000 years old. This might be the biggest contested issue in all of religion. Some creationists say 6,000, others say 10,000. Meanwhile, evidence of a real global flood points to it happening around 12,000 years ago. And then there are dinosaurs, whose fossils tell us they are millions, not thousands of years extinct. Christians don't put much stock in the fossil record. According to some Christians, dinosaurs were on the Ark 6,000 years ago. Genesis 6:19-20 says 2 of every land animal were brought to the Ark. That means land-dwelling dinosaurs got their golden ticket too. 2 by 2, Triceratops and T-Rex lined up like they were going on a Jurassic cruise. As if the Ark weren't crowded enough already. Creationist researchers have come up with a solution for how Noah fit so many animals on his boat. They say that the Bible only mentions 2 of each kind of animal. So, although science has named over 600 different dinosaurs at least, creationists say all of those varieties probably boil down to about 55 kinds. So, only 55 pairs of dinos on the Ark, leaving plenty of room for the apes and hippos and elephants, you get it. Would there really be enough room? Amazingly, yes. Genesis 6:15 gives the specs of Noah's Ark. It's approximately 300 by 50 by 30 cubits. Translated, that's about 510 feet long, 85 feet wide, and 51 feet tall. It was bigger than a floating Costco with a volume of about 2.21 million cubic feet. That's the equivalent of over 500 semi-trailers. You could start a decent Amazon warehouse with that kind of space. But was it enough for all animals plus 55 kinds of dinosaurs? Again, surprisingly, yes. John Woodmarapp, researcher and genius math guy, estimated that Noah needed around 16,000 animals on board to save the species that are still alive today. That is counting all the land vertebrates, even extinct ones like the thylacine and cave bears. Even with all of these animals counted, they would only take up about half of the Ark's room. It's amazing how small you can make a zoo when there's an apocalypse brewing. The rest of the room on the Ark could have easily been reserved for dinosaurs. I'm not saying that Noah saved the dinosaurs. I mean, if he did, then where did they go? There is still the fossil record to deal with, which does not support any world in which dinosaurs lived beyond 66 million years ago. Still, who really knows? I sure don't, and scientists don't either. If the pre-flood world was as crazy as the Bible says it was, maybe there were a few dinosaurs hanging out. Would that be such a disappointment? pre-flood ruins in Japan. In the serene green countryside of Japan, where you can spend all day soaking in the peaceful vibes, there is an underground temple straight out of Indiana Jones meets Minecraft. It's called the Oya Stone Quarry. And it is not just big, it's how did ancient people even do this big? Some researchers are whispering what sounds like heresy to mainstream historians. They are saying that humans didn't build the quarry, or at least not the humans you've heard of. This is Japan's greatest underground secret, and it's going to flip your world on its head. Hidden in Utsunomiya City, deep beneath the surface, the Oya Stone Quarry is carved out of volcanic rock called Oya Stone. The place is thousands of square feet and wasn't made with bulldozers, lasers, or the magic of Photoshop. According to conventional history, it was made by ordinary people just trying to quarry stone. Hey, been there, done that, am I right? Who doesn't love quarrying some good old ore? But there's something off about the place. Parts of the Oya Stone Quarry, which is spread out like a Cretan labyrinth, are tens of thousands of years old. Parts of this place date back to when Noah was building the ark. The importance of the quarry is in the Oya stone, which is kind of magical. When it's first dug up, it's soft and squishy like a volcanic marshmallow. But once it's exposed to air, it hardens into a super durable material perfect for building temples, shrines, and fortress walls. As you can imagine, the Oya stone was greatly coveted by architects in ancient Japan. Workers knew exactly what they were doing while carving out the quarry. They sculpted an entire underground city, though nobody ever lived in it. But wait, hold up, chill your ramen for 2 seconds. What if it wasn't the ancient Japanese who first opened the quarry? What if someone or something started it and the Japanese picked up where they left off? The walls of the quarry look as if they were made with precision laser beams. You and 15 friends with unlimited sandpaper couldn't make walls this smooth. Even with modern technology, replicating this giant cave system would be a nightmare. Today's machines with stone-splitting robot arms that glide along rails like mechanical ballerinas still can't precisely mimic the ancient technique. Workers use crowbars, cameras, pulleys, tape measures, and still can't match the precision of whoever was in Oya Stone Quarry thousands of years ago. Some say the imperial family was behind the quarry's heyday. What better way to prove you're a god emperor than to build temples out of lava rock that hardens like divine concrete? Others believe the Oya Quarry was started by a race of advanced humans who lived before the flood. Only thousands of years after the flood did Japanese people find the quarry and reopen it. Whatever the truth is, Oya Stone Quarry reminds us that there is still a lot we don't know about our own past. And maybe, just maybe, some things weren't meant to be completely explained. Which is why we should probably call this channel Origins Unexplained. And now for a quick break because it's shout out time. I want to give a big thank you to Todd and Dominic Young for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you guys. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to join the Origins Explained family. The advanced humans of the pre-flood realm. The world before the flood wasn't just some soggy prequel to the Bible. It was an era shrouded in mystery, legends, and just maybe a dash of steampunk. Scholars continue to argue about how intelligent humans were before the flood. Were they baking bread, clacking rocks together, or building rocket ships? If you try to find answers online, things can get a little weird. I've seen people claim Noah's Ark was powered by nuclear energy. Some people say the pyramids were giant Wi-Fi routers for global internet. The theories can get so crazy, you'll wish for another flood. But here's the thing. The only ancient source available that talks about life before the flood and doesn't sound like it was written on a bathroom wall is the book of Genesis. The Bible really is the best known record for life before the deluge. The Bible goes into weirdly specific detail about the pre-flood people and their jobs. For example, Adam and Eve's kids. The first kids ever born were also the first farmers. Cain was out there cultivating crops like a whole food supplier, and Abel was herding sheep like he was auditioning for The Bachelor. All my potential wives are sheep. Abel was murdered by Cain, who then left the Garden of Eden and built a city. A city with plumbing, zoning laws, taxes, and maybe the neighborhood watch, just in case any other siblings got any murderous ideas. He clearly had the knowledge needed to start his own civilization. Then there was Jubal, dropping beats on the harp and flute like a pre-flood Mozart. And there was Tubal-Cain, not a hybrid of Tubal and Cain, but a totally unique guy who worked with bronze and iron. Tubal-Cain was so skilled that he taught other smiths and spread knowledge of metallurgy across the world. These people were all skilled when they shouldn't have been. Mainstream archaeologists say no way was someone working with iron before the flood, nor was anybody farming. These things just didn't exist before the global flood, or so says scientists. But the Bible says these things did indeed exist, and people practiced them. The Bible seems to paint a picture of a much more technologically advanced world prior to the Great Reset. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Think about how much someone like, say, Steve Jobs accomplished in his life, and Steve barely cracked 60. Meanwhile, Adam lived 930 years, and Methuselah lived for 969 years. The pre-flood people of the world had lifespans more than 9 times as long as ours today. Think of how much they could have accomplished in 900 years. And Alexander the Great conquered practically the world before he turned 30. Imagine if he had 900 years to wage war. He probably would have conquered Mars while he was at it. Edison had 84 years on this planet and managed 1,093 patents. If he'd had the lifespan of Jared, 962 years, we'd be vacationing on Saturn by now. Edison would have cooked up a toaster that can teleport toast right into your mouth. Ah, the invention you never knew you needed. If you had 900 years to live, what do you think you'd accomplish? The Great Flood before Gilgamesh. This will make your head spin. You may know that the flood isn't a Christian invention. Its first appearance was not in the Bible. It wasn't even in the Epic of Gilgamesh, as some sources suggest. The original flood story involves a guy named Atrahasis, whom very few people today have ever heard of. The story is recorded in an ancient Akkadian book from the 17th century BC, almost 4,000 years ago. It's called the Atrahasis Epic, and it's all about how the gods sent a flood to destroy humanity. In the narrative, the gods are tired. They are as tired as overworked interns at a startup being paid in avocados. The gods have been digging rivers, moving dirt, and basically building Earth with 0 lunch breaks. The younger gods finally lose it, throw a tantrum, and quit. This is a big problem for the master gods like Enki, sometimes called Ea. They suggest making a new species to take over the manual labor. They just need some clay, a sprinkle of divine intelligence, and the sacrificed brain matter of a god named Welu. Come on, you didn't think intelligent life could be made without a god's brain matter, did you? Where do you think the spark of life comes from? The goddess Nintu mixed all the ingredients together and human beings were born. Unlike Genesis, the Akkadian myth says that 7 men and 7 women came out of the oven ready to start civilization. It makes more sense than Adam and Eve having inbred children. At least with 7 different couples, the kids don't have to get weird with their siblings. At first, the gods were happy. Humans were planting, harvesting, and giving praise. But humans, being humans, got loud. Ever been to a football game? There was partying, arguing, and fighting. The god King Enlil grew sick of humanity and decided to send a flood to destroy them. But Enki, who had the brilliant idea of making people in the first place, was not pleased. He sent an SOS text to his buddy Atrahasis that read something like this. Hey, A, you need to build a boat ASAP. Bring animals, bring snacks, waterproof everything, and don't tell the other humans. Atrahasis, being exceedingly wise and not in the mood for death by deluge, did what he was told. He survived the storm just like Noah. And while this story is similar to the one in the Epic of Gilgamesh, it might be older. No one's really sure. But there are 2 versions from the same era, one with Atrahasis and another with a guy named Utnapishtim. There are other similar stories in Egyptian myth and Chinese myth, Inca, Aztec, Hopi, you name the ancient culture, they had a flood story. Are you starting to get a picture of what the pre-flood world was like? Dinosaurs, guys working on passion projects for 500 years at a time, gods, aliens, genetic experiments, and I'm not even halfway done yet, so keep watching. Antediluvian giants, fact or fiction? Ready for the Bible's original monster movie? At the end of the pre-flood world, things were rough on planet Earth. The Bible tells us that what began as a peaceful garden with 2 fresh lovers and a forbidden fruit turned into hell on earth. Picture giants with the Habsburg jaw riding around on dinosaurs, catching humans in nets like they're in a Planet of the Apes movie. Those giants are known as the Nephilim, and they were one of the main reasons for the flood. Thanks a lot, giants. Genesis 6 opened with a line that sounds suspiciously like the start of a divine soap opera. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves. In other words, heavenly beings got a little too interested in earthly ladies and impregnated them with their giant babies. The term Nephilim comes from the Hebrew root naphal, meaning to fall. They were literally the children of fallen angels. Why they were giant has never really been explained. Genesis gives us exactly 3 verses on this divine-human crossover, and then nothing. To find out more, you have to peel open the Book of Enoch. It's an ancient Jewish apocalyptic text, the Bible's extended universe before Marvel made extended universes cool. In Enoch, the story of the Nephilim gets fleshed out big time. It claims a gang of 200 angels called the Watchers, maybe the Stalkers would have been more appropriate, looked down from heaven, saw how comely human women were, and couldn't control themselves. Their leader, Semjaza, knew it was a bad idea, so he made the other angels swear an oath of fealty to him. If he was going down in flames for disobeying God and hooking up with a human, his fellow angels were going down with him. The Book of Enoch claims the Nephilim were 3,000 ells tall. For those not up to date on their biblical units of measurement, that's about 9,800 feet. So the Nephilim were the size of Godzilla, which isn't particularly realistic. Enoch goes on to say that first, the Nephilim ate all the food. Then they ate the people. And you thought your neighbors were annoying. The world was collapsing in a heap of infernal magic, mutants, giants, and fallen angels. The Watchers began giving out unauthorized divine knowledge to the humans like it was Black Friday at a magic shop. To women, they give charms, enchantments, root-based witchcraft, and ancient eyeliner tutorials. To men, they gave swords, shields, metallurgy, and all the ingredients to wage war. The world spiraled into chaos. The Nephilim were hangry. The humans were waging war and wielding magic. Up in heaven, God was watching with both eyes closed, constantly sighing and pinching the bridge of his nose. Eventually, God had enough. He sent a flood to recalibrate things. The Nephilim were a big problem and had to go. The Watchers were in big trouble and got locked up in an eternal prison under the Euphrates River in Mesopotamia. Humans were allowed to try again, starting with Noah and his family. And right about now, it's looking like humans might be due for another flood, unless we can stop being jerks to each other. Whether you wish to believe in the Nephilim, that's up to you. But according to the Book of Enoch, this was the world before the cataclysm. It was brutal, evil, and full of guys as tall as the Eiffel Tower. How long do you think you would have lasted? Let me know in the comments. Chinese flood rewrites history. A long time ago in a gorge far, far away, China had its very own version of the flood. But was China's Great Flood the same as the one that swept away the rest of the world? Surely if the flood was global, China was hit too, right? Somewhere around 1920 BC, Mother Nature decided to throw a tantrum in China. I'm talking about a full-blown, river-ripping, village-swallowing, landscape-redesigning flood. And now, for the first time, science just might have found its muddy footprints. Up until now, China's flood was a legend. Scientists had as much faith in China's biblical flood as the Bible's biblical flood. It was considered the bedtime story equivalent of a Michael Bay disaster film. But now, scientists have turned myth into reality. Hold up though, wouldn't you like to hear the myth before it's busted? If you grew up hearing stories about Noah building a boat the size of a Walmart parking lot in Texas, you're not alone. But China had its own aquatic superhero too. They didn't have Noah, but rather Emperor Yu. Legend says Emperor Yu didn't just survive the flood, he beat it. When the flood struck China, Emperor Yu grabbed a map, rerouted rivers, and forced the floodwaters to mostly avoid his most important cities. While Atlantis was being thrown to the sea dogs, so to speak, China was fighting the flood. With Emperor Yu's genius, they persevered and came out on the other side of the flood with wet ankles but intact houses. The issue for the last 4,000 years or so was trying to confirm that Emperor Yu was a real person. A lot of historians figured he was about as real as King Midas, the guy whose touch turned anything to gold. This is where I introduce you to Dr. Qinglong Wu and his team of geological detectives. They went hunting for evidence of the Chinese flood in the Jishi Gorge, where the Yellow River dives off the Tibetan plateau like it's late for an appointment. And boom, they found it. The team identified gigantic gray silt deposits sitting dozens of feet above current water levels. The deposits are clearly from a time when the water level was way, way higher. Dr. Wu's theory is that a landslide dammed the Yellow River 4,000 years ago. It created a temporary lake. Then, when the water was too much, the dam broke. The breaking dam unleashed a mega flood that charged downriver like a frat party through a corn maze. More water poured out of the dammed river per second than Niagara Falls in the rainy season. That's Dr. Wu's theory anyway. Convincing, right? No one would blame you for accepting such a well-thought-out story. But there is another possibility. Another theory is that there was no dam and no bursting lake. The flood that hit the Yellow River was the same one that hit the rest of the world, and Emperor Yu was stuck trying to save his people from the wrath of either God, Enlil, or some other cranky deity. It all depends which culture's flood myth you prefer. Let me know which story you like best in the comments. Atlantis before the flood. It was history's greatest vanishing act. In the world before the flood, there was one city-state that reigned supreme above all others. They were the most technologically advanced, the most liberated, the most boastful, the most self-indulging civilization of prehistory. Do you know who I'm talking about? Of course, Atlantis. Some 11,600 years ago, the Earth decided to play a very wet, very final game of the floor is lava. Except in this version, the floor was a city, and the lava was a biblical flood. And there were earthquakes too, because why stop at one apocalypse? Welcome to Atlantis, the ancient world's version of Vegas meets Venice. It was glamorous, powerful, and is currently sitting at the bottom of the ocean like your favorite pair of sunglasses after a regrettable jet ski ride. But here's the part most people miss about Atlantis. It wasn't Atlantis versus the waves. Ancient sources tell us that Atlantis was heavily mixed up with two other major powers, Athens and Egypt. When I say ancient sources, I'm not even talking about Plato, the guy who gets all the credit for dreaming up the Atlantis story, because Plato learned the fable of Atlantis from Egyptian priests who had been passing the story along orally for generations. Sonchis is the name of one such priest. He met a Greek statesman named Solon and told him that Athens once led a coalition of nations alongside Egypt to fight Atlantis. Athens and Egypt were NATO, and Atlantis was, I don't know, let's say the Red Army. After much fighting, Atlantis lost. It was forced into submission by stronger powers. But in a twisted act of the gods, Atlantis, Egypt, and Athens were all hit by a monster tsunami and earthquake combo. Egypt recovered, as did Athens, but Atlantis was scrubbed from the maps. Scrubbed from the whole dang earth. Sorry guys, tough luck. Modern scholars have a real love-hate relationship with Plato's story. Most toss it aside like a soggy myth that's no longer edible, especially archaeologist Keith Fitzpatrick Matthews, who has been very outspoken against the existence of Atlantis. Keith has argued that continents, assuming Atlantis was a continent, don't just sink like a movie set trapdoor. Plate tectonics doesn't do fast drama. It does slow-motion shoves, meaning Atlantis sinking in a single day and night is geologically absurd. But if Atlantis didn't sink, then what happened to it? Plato describes Atlantis as a massive rectangular plain surrounded on all sides by mountains. That sounds to me like a basin. A big, pretty, sun-kissed basin that was basically one landslide away from becoming a giant swimming pool. Now imagine this. A section of those encircling mountains crumbles during a quake. Boom! Ocean water rushes in like it's late for brunch. And if you think this kind of thing is unrealistic, just ask Port Royal in Jamaica or ancient Helike in Greece. Both of those cities took the express elevator straight to Atlantisville after earthquakes. And this is what's known as the bathtub hypothesis. It's possible Atlantis didn't sink under the ocean but was flooded and destroyed. Its ruins could be anywhere. Supporters of the bathtub hypothesis often claim that the Venezuelan basin matches Plato's description, placing the city in the Caribbean. What do you think? Does the bathtub hypothesis hold any water? The City of Helike. Forget Atlantis. Helike was the real deal. Once upon a time in ancient Greece, there was a city called Helike. I just mentioned it 5 seconds ago. It got wrecked, forgotten, and then rediscovered like that elusive white sock behind your dryer. Atlantis may elude scientists still, but Helike is a time capsule. It allows us to take a peek at what a sunken city from ancient times really looks like. And trust me, it is awesome. Helike was rich, powerful, and part of Poseidon's #1 fan club. They had temples, coins, sea blessings, the whole naval vibe. Traders came to Helike to kiss the sandals of sea gods and pick up a souvenir amphora or two. Helike also led the Achaean League, a squad of 12 Greek cities. Perhaps the Achaean League had something to do with the whole alliance between Athens and Egypt when it came to fighting Atlantis. Who knows? For all their worshipping of the sea god, he didn't do much to stop them from being obliterated. In 373 BC, Helike was hit by a land-splitting, foundation-cracking, gods clutch your togas level earthquake. It crippled their city in an instant. And then came the tsunami. Poseidon's own fan club got drowned by the ocean. The irony is so thick you could spread it on your toast. For centuries, ancient authors wrote about the city, but eventually it was covered in river sludge and everyone forgot about it. Not until the 20th century did Professor Dora Katsanopoulou rediscover the city right next to the coast. In 2001, they hit archaeological pay dirt. Buildings, pottery, coins, ruins, the whole ancient city party package. And they started whispering about Atlantis, saying Helike may have been the real inspiration behind the legend. The point is that throughout history, cities rise and fall. Sometimes they slip into the sea, and sometimes they're buried on the coast by avalanches, tsunamis, and earthquakes. You just never know what secrets of the ancient world are hiding beneath your feet. The Shaft of Osiris. The Giza Plateau hides a secret so profound it could rewrite history. There is a forgotten door. This mystery doorway is quiet, unassuming, and easy to miss unless you're specifically looking for a portal to the underworld. Behind this mysterious door is a vertical tunnel so mysterious, so waterlogged, and so off-limits, it might as well have a "Welcome to the Forbidden Zone" sign nailed to it. The door leads into the Shaft of Osiris. Without a doubt, one of the most mysterious places in Egypt. You might say it's even more captivating than the pyramids, simply because of its secret origins. Your average tourist doesn't have a chance. The Shaft of Osiris is more exclusive than a billionaire's bunker and twice as creepy. The shaft is a 3-level, water-flooded hole carved deep into the Giza bedrock, rumored to be the final resting place of Osiris himself. Osiris is the god of the dead and lord of the afterlife. There is a theory that Osiris was one of the Anunnaki alien gods who ruled Egypt in the pre-flood world. In fact, all the Egyptian gods may have been aliens, according to this theory. But the Shaft of Osiris is the only place known where one of their bodies might actually be hidden. First marked on a map in 1837 by British Egyptologist John Perring, the Shaft of Osiris wouldn't be officially uncovered until 1933 by Salim Hassan, who stumbled upon it while clearing a road near the Sphinx. The problem for both John and Salim was the shaft itself was totally flooded with groundwater from who knows where. Even the most enthusiastic archaeologists looked at it and said, yeah, no thanks. Then, in 1999, Dr. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's most famous fedora-wearing, ancient curse-dodging archaeologist, showed up to tackle the shaft. With the determination of a man who has played too much Tomb Raider, Hawass finally pumped the water out and kicked off the official dig. But this wasn't your average pyramid tour. The shaft was locked down tighter than Fort Knox. VIPs needed clearance from Hawass himself. It's like they were excavating something that the public was not allowed to see. Could they have been quietly removing the body of a being they knew to be from another world? Maybe, I don't know. What Zahi Hawass revealed about the shaft points to someone very important having been buried down there. Below the first level is a room with 7 niches, 2 of which contain massive basalt sarcophagi. One niche has iron oxide stains on the ceiling. From what? Nobody knows. Rusty alien tech? Ancient Egyptian Red Bull spill? On the 3rd and last level, things get really weird. Here, surrounded by still water, sits a granite sarcophagus on a tiny artificial island like the final boss of ancient tombs. Add some dim lighting and the quiet drip of groundwater echoing through the shaft, And you've got the perfect setup for a horror movie you really don't want to be in. Who was buried in the third level on the artificial underground island? Nobody knows. Osiris, an unknown king, an unknown priest, Pharaoh Khufu's annoying nephew? The whole thing is a huge mystery. Some suspect the shaft predates the biblical flood. Others think it was used as a ceremonial temple. But what I want to know is what may have been removed from the shaft during the earliest days of excavations in 1999. Can't help but feeling like something hugely important was removed for the tomb before anyone was the wiser. But what? What do you think? How advanced do you think the pre-flood world was? Let me know in the comments, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Port Royal. This city was a haven for pirates and privateers who would congregate to attack and steal, giving it the title of the wickedest city in the world. In 1655, the English conquered Jamaica from the Spanish. They established the unofficial capital of Port Royal on the southeast coast, at the mouth of Kingston Harbor. To ensure its defense, in 1657, Governor Edward Doyley permitted a group of privateers to take up headquarters at Port Royal in order to attack Spanish ships loaded with treasure from South America. It soon became customary for the Port Royal government to shelter pirates in exchange for protection against the Spanish. The city was famous for its displays of new money and loose morals. The British Crown sanctioned privateering by issuing documents that essentially acted as pirates' licenses. Everybody got rich, and of course, a portion of all booty went to the town government. Pirates flocked to Port Royal, constituting a large percentage of its rapid population and economic growth. By the late 1600s, Port Royal was the second largest European city in the New World, and nearly half its residents were involved in privateering. Naturally, Port Royal was a haven for vices, and around 1/4 of its buildings were either a bar or a brothel. A 7.5 magnitude earthquake hit Port Royal on June 7, 1692, followed by a tsunami. The sand the city was built on liquefied. Buildings, roads, and people were sucked into the earth. Altogether, 33 acres of the city became submerged under 40 feet of water, and 2,000 people died. Some considered the event to be a punishment from God on the most wicked and sinful city in the world. Much of the sunken city remains eerily intact, earning it the reputation of an underwater Pompeii. Numerous artifacts have been retrieved, including liquor bottles, smoking pipes, kitchenware, and a pocket watch stopped at 1143 and dated 1686. In 1999, Port Royal became a designated National Heritage Site. Pavlopetri. Pavlopetri is the oldest submerged city in the world. In 2011, it was the first underwater city ever to be digitally mapped and recorded in 3 dimensions, then brought back to life with computer graphics thanks to the BBC. Off the coast of Peloponnese, Greece, is a semi-submerged prehistoric settlement in southeastern Laconia. While it dates back 5,000 years, it has a lot in common with port cities from today. It had well-built roads and walls with organized 2-story houses. There was even a water system of channels and gutters, and the city had courtyards and gardens, a cemetery, and large public buildings, all evidence of a stratified, organized society during the Bronze Age. It is so old that it existed during the time the Iliad was set in. The fate of Pavlopetri was sealed around 1000 BC, when no less than 3 earthquakes affected the region. The first alone was enough to sink the city. Even after 5,000 years, the town's original layout was left practically untouched. Traces of its buildings, streets, and burial grounds are still intact. Historians believe it was a center for commerce for the Minoan and Mycenaean civilizations, with large warehouses full of storage containers. The place is full of rich cultural history and treasures. However, the city is threatened by pollution that ships release into the bay. Anchors and treasure hunters could potentially damage the old and fragile remains. Given that this is one of the oldest and best preserved ancient cities in the world, we should definitely try to preserve Pavlopetri as best as we can. Bristol Channel floods. On the morning of January 30th, 1607, over 200 square miles of southwest England and Wales were overrun by a massive surge of seawater in what became known as the Bristol Channel floods. According to one witness, the flood appeared as huge and mighty hills of water, tumbling one over another, and moved forth over the landscape with great swiftness. Known as the Great Flood of 1607, many coastal towns and cities were severely damaged, and at least 20 villages were completely submerged. The flooding extended up the Bristol Channel, which was then known as the Severn Sea, as far as Gloucester, and inundated the urban center of Bristol with with water. On the English side of the channel, the surge traveled 14 miles inland to Glastonbury. Some scientists believe the influx of water may have been caused by a squall-induced storm surge combined with a spring tide, while others theorize that the flood was triggered by a tsunami, perhaps following an earthquake. And now for number 8. But first, if you are a returning subscriber, welcome back. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell before you leave. The Eltanin Antenna. In 1964, over 55 years ago, the oceanographic research vessel USNS Eltanin, formerly a U.S. Navy ice-breaking cargo ship, photographed a strange antenna-like object on the seafloor west of Cape Horn, off Chile's Tierra del Fuego archipelago, where it appears to stand upright some 12,808 feet below the water's surface. Naturally, conspiracy theorists, including New Zealand pilot and author Bruce Cathy, speculated that the Eltanin Antenna, as the object came to be called, was an extraterrestrial artifact. In a 1968 article for Saga magazine, author Brad Steiger wrote that the object was an astonishing piece of machinery, very much like the cross between a TV antenna and a telemetry antenna. Other, possibly more rational guessers, have suggested that the item is a bizarre-looking carnivorous sponge called Chondrocladia concrescens. In their 1971 book, The Face of the Deep, authors Bruce C. Heezen and Charles D. Hollister described sea concrescens as a sponge that somewhat resembles a space-age microwave antenna. Going further back to 1888, American scientist and engineer Alexander Agassiz wrote in his 3 Cruises of the Blake that the sponges have a long stem ending in ramifying roots sunk deeply into the mud. This stem has nodes with 4 to 6 club-like appendages. Sounds like a plausible explanation, but what do you think? Is the antenna-like object a carnivorous sea sponge or a flooded ancient alien ruin? Let me know in the comments below. The Great Drowning of Men. The Grote Mandrenke, or Great Drowning of Men, also called the St. Marcellus's Flood, was an extratropical cyclone of great intensity that came from the North Sea and swept violently over parts of Europe in January 1362, namely the British Isles, the Netherlands, northern Germany, and Denmark. At least 25,000 people and as many as 100,000 perished in the storm, which is sometimes called the Second St. Marcellus Flood because it came over 100 years after the even deadlier First St. Marcellus Flood in 1219, which claimed 36,000 lives. English residents were the first to feel the storm's effects, with one witness writing, "A strong gale blew from the north so violently for a day and night that it flattened trees, mills, houses, and a great many church towers." The violent storm surge caused even worse damage in the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark, where it overran virtually every embankment that was in place to prevent flooding. 60 Danish parishes were swallowed by the salt sea, according to one written account, and entire settlements were wiped off the map. The coastline was permanently transformed throughout the affected region due to erosion. Islands were broken apart, and parts of the mainland were turned into islands. The disaster also contributed to the formation of the shallow Zuiderzee Bay in the Netherlands. This and other storm tides throughout 13th and 14th century Europe were somewhat common amid the unpredictable weather that was characteristic of the beginning of the Little Ice Age that followed the medieval warming period. Did you know that? Let me know in the comments below. Lake Titicaca ruins. Lake Titicaca is South America's largest lake, occupying over 3,300 square miles total at an unusually high altitude of 12,500 feet above sea level. It straddles the Bolivia-Peru border, and the lake contains around 24 submerged archaeological sites, many which were discovered around 2008 by archaeologist Christophe Delaire, who received information about the ruins from locals. This wasn't the first time ancient ruins, including from pre-Inca civilizations, were discovered within the lake, but it was perhaps the most significant. In 2018, the Bolivian government announced its plans to build an underwater museum in partnership with UNESCO at Santiago de Ojelaya, a major site located about 5 minutes from the town of Tiquina. The $10 million project, which is being constructed with the help of a Belgian development agency, is slated to be completed sometime this year, if it is finished on schedule. Visitors will be able to see 2 different types of shoreline and submerged ruins, according to José Luis Paz, Director of Heritage at Bolivia's Ministry of Culture, ones which correspond to human settlements and others which were the sites of spiritual offerings. The spiritual sites were strategically placed throughout the lake, and they were probably implemented years after the human settlements were flooded, Paz explained to the BBC. Experts and archaeological divers found over 10,000 items, including gold and ceramic objects. They are remarkably well preserved, and many will remain underwater while a few will be salvaged. The artifacts are as much as 2,000 years old, with some dating all the way back to when the Tiwanaku civilization dominated the immediate landscape. Experts from UNESCO UNESCO speculate that the ruins found within Lake Titicaca represent a mere fraction of the once thriving Tiwanaku Empire. North Sea and St. Lucia's floods. The North Sea flood of 1212, which devastated the Netherlands, is one of the oldest and deadliest floods on record, claiming around 60,000 lives and requiring years of recovery. Just 75 years later, on December 14, 1287, the Netherlands was struck yet again, this time by an intense storm tide that became to be known as the St. Lucia's flood, which also dealt a huge blow to northern Germany. As many as 80,000 people perished in this disaster, which left just 10 houses intact on Greenland, a now uninhabited Dutch island that the flood nearly swept out of existence. The St. Lucia's flood, which had a major impact on the history of the Netherlands, is sometimes compared to a more modern event, the North Sea flood of 1953, based on their similar meteorological conditions. Both catastrophes appear to have been caused by a high tide colliding with an extreme low-pressure system, causing a massive storm surge. Like the Grootmandrenke, which I told you about before, the St. Lucia's flood contributed to the formation of the Zuiderzee Bay. It was the last event that finally gave way to any remaining natural barriers between the Zuiderzee, which was previously a freshwater lake connected to the North Sea by a river. Rock Lake Pyramids. While some states are home to reported Bigfoot sightings or UFOs, Wisconsin boasts alleged sightings of underwater pyramids, which sit at the bottom of Rock Lake in the state's south-central region. Located roughly 20 miles east of Madison in a town called Lake Mills, the lake is home to submerged rock piles that some people believe are ancient pyramids built by a pre-Columbian civilization before the region was flooded during the 19th century. But other evidence shows that Rock Lake is extremely ancient and that it's existed for thousands of years, so it could be possible that there are some ruins there from a civilization that no longer exists, and that we know nothing about. Perhaps the most surprising element of this story is the widespread following the pyramid theory actually has, including plastics executive Archie Eshborn, who is the primary leader of the ongoing hunt for the structures, according to Simpson Street Free Press. His group, which includes history students, scholars, and scuba divers, believes so strongly in the pyramid's existence, they've invested at least $50,000 of their own money into the search effort. But the legend of the underwater pyramids is not without critics, who maintain that the story is just a myth and that the structures do not exist. Instead, they claim the so-called pyramids, which sit under 40 feet of water, are merely natural formations. In other words, big piles of rocks. St. Felix Flood. If you haven't noticed already, there's somewhat of a theme when it comes to floods striking in certain parts of the world, namely the low-lying countries of Western Europe. November 5th, 1530 was no exception for the Netherlands, which seems to be one of the hardest hit countries when it comes to catastrophic flooding over the centuries. On that day, which happened to be St. Felix Day, Zeeland was hit by a massive flood, and parts of the region were washed away entirely. One such area, which was nearly completely wiped off the map, was called Oostwatering. Within it were 18 villages and an entire city known as Reimersval. Reimersval managed to survive the flood due to its heightened elevation, but it was left as an isolated island. Today, there's a municipality named after the lost city, but the original Reimersval ultimately succumbed to repeated floods, including the St. Felix flood, and the last remaining residents vacated in 1632. There's nothing left of it now, but the city's former location, which sits under a series of construction projects called the Oosterdam, is recognized as a National Archaeological Monument. Sunken City of Cuba. Nearly 2 decades ago, marine engineer Pauline Zalitsky and her husband Paul Weinsweig discovered a series of massive stone blocks in geometric shapes in the Caribbean Sea off Cuba using sonar equipment. The mysterious formations, which came to be known as the Sunken City of Cuba, sit 2,300 feet below the water surface. According to researchers, it would take 50,000 years for the ruins of a civilization to sink that deep, leading many to speculate that perhaps the structures weren't man-made after all. Meanwhile, others developed more far-flung theories based on the popular notion among experts that no societies advanced enough to build such structures even existed that far back in time. After all, with the evidence sitting on the seafloor, perhaps prehistoric peoples were more advanced than scholars give them credit for. To the credit of supporters of this theory, Mayan and Yucateco oral legends claim that their ancestors derived from a civilization that lived on an island that was eventually swallowed by the sea. Some researchers even believe this is possible, and that there may have even once been a land bridge connecting Cuba with Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, or that the Caribbean Sea itself was a dry basin at one point long ago. Investigation of the site only went so far, with some scientists willing to classify the sonar readings as inconclusive, while others outright disputed the possibility that any man-made structures sit at the bottom of the ocean, claiming that computer renditions of the formations are what made them appear man-made, rather than natural. But there are believers still out there supporting the idea that an ancient society created the structures that now sit beneath thousands of feet of water, who say that Zalitsky and other researchers were scared off from further exploring the site by those who simply don't want to admit to the truth and challenge long-held beliefs about world history and the previous existence of advanced civilizations. Doggerland. Doggerland is a submerged region of northwest Europe that once sat on dry land. Britain was once connected to mainland Europe and constituted the northwest edge of the continent before the last ice age ended, when sea levels rose and flooded low-lying lands, forming the UK island we're familiar with today. 12,000 years ago, the waters between the UK and the mainland, which are now part of the North Sea, were instead a vast tract of land called Doggerland, consisting of sloping hills, marshland, wooded valleys, and swampy lagoons, according to National Geographic. Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who migrated according to the season lived there, and they spent their lives hunting, fishing, and gathering nuts, berries, and other edibles. Around 8,200 years ago, a North American glacial lake released a catastrophic amount of water, and an underwater landslide off Norway also occurred, resulting in the massive flooding that eliminated Doggerland from existence. Modern fishermen uncovered the first evidence of the people of Doggerland's nomadic nature, including 9,000-year-old bones and tools from the sea floor. These artifacts captured the attention of experts who previously did not know about Doggerland at all. Oil companies located in the North Sea helped further investigate by providing sophisticated seismic survey data, which scientists used to map an 18,000 square mile area of Doggerland pre-flood. The findings among researchers indicate that the people who experienced Doggerland becoming inundated dealt with climate change effects that can, in some ways, be compared to what's going on now. For example, they were pushed inland by rising seawaters, which climate scientists believe may become the reality for modern people who inhabit coastal and low-lying areas. Thanks for watching! Would you like to learn more about lost civilizations and floods? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. See you later! Bye!